Steve Harvey completely lost it when a racist slur was hurled at him during a live broadcast, shocking millions of viewers. The moment could have instantly destroyed his decades-long career. Nobody expected what happened next. Not the studio audience, not the network executives, and certainly not the person who uttered those hateful words. In just minutes, the beloved TV host would transform this ugly moment into something that would change how America viewed him forever. The lights of the studio burned bright as Steve Harvey commanded the stage with his trademark charisma. The audience was completely captivated, laughing on cue as Harvey delivered his signature facial expressions and perfectly timed jokes. After decades in entertainment, he had mastered the art of family-friendly television and built an empire worth millions. Network executives watched from the shadows, smiling at the ratings machine Harvey had become. A host who could turn even the most ordinary game show moments into comedy gold. "Ladies and gentlemen, let's welcome our next contestant," Harvey announced, flashing his megawatt smile as the cameras panned to follow him. The audience erupted in applause, their admiration palpable. This was just another day in the life of entertainment's most reliable hitmaker. What nobody could see was the immense pressure Harvey carried daily. As one of the most visible black entertainers in America, he had carefully crafted his public persona. Professional, non-threatening, and universally appealing. Every word, every gesture, every reaction was calculated to maintain the empire he'd built from nothing. Behind that famous mustache and tailored suit was a man who had once been homeless, sleeping in his car, fighting for every opportunity. A man who had clawed his way to the top despite a system that wasn't designed for his success. The production assistant gave Harvey his cue card with the contestants' details. Just routine information, name, hometown, occupation. Nothing that suggested this segment would be different from the thousands Harvey had hosted before. The floor manager counted down with his fingers. 3, 2, 1. Back from commercial. The contestant stepped forward, seemingly ordinary. Mid-30s, average height, unremarkable outfit. The kind of person who blends into any crowd. The production followed its familiar rhythm. The lights, the applause, the routine questions. Nothing suggested this would be anything but another forgettable segment in Harvey's long career. "So, tell us a little about yourself," Harvey said, his voice carrying that perfect blend of interest and enthusiasm that made contestants feel special while keeping the show moving at the right pace. The contestant smiled, seemingly comfortable in the spotlight. There was a brief exchange. Pleasant, unmemorable. The audience chuckled at Harvey's gentle teasing. The directors in the control room were already planning the camera cuts for the next new segment. The network representative was texting about the strong viewership numbers. Then it happened. The contestant looked directly at Harvey and casually dropped the slur, the word hanging in the air like a grenade with its pin pulled. The studio fell deadly silent. For a split second, time froze as everyone processed what had just been said on live television to one of America's most recognizable black entertainers. In the control room, producers froze. The director's mouth fell open. A production assistant dropped her clipboard with a clatter that echoed through the stunned silence. In the audience, faces registered shock, horror, discomfort. A wave of emotions sweeping through the previously jubilant crowd. The cameras caught the exact moment Harvey's face transformed. The smile vanished. His eyes widened, then narrowed dangerously. The muscles in his jaw tightened visibly. His shoulders, normally relaxed and open, squared and tensed. The man who had spent decades perfecting his public persona was suddenly stripped bare, raw, wounded, and visibly furious. The stage manager frantically signaled to cut to commercial, But the director was too stunned to react quickly enough. The network censor lunged for the delay button, but those precious seconds had already passed. The slur had gone out live, broadcast to millions of homes across America. The contestant, seeing Harvey's transformation, seemed to suddenly realize the magnitude of what they had done. Their smug expression faltered, replaced by uncertainty as Harvey took a step toward them. What nobody in that studio knew was that just that morning, Harvey had been discussing with his agent a massive new contract negotiation, the biggest of his career. A multi-year, multi-show deal that would secure his legacy and his family's future for generations. A deal that could evaporate in seconds if this moment spiraled out of control on national television. But what the millions of viewers leaning toward their screens didn't know was that Steve Harvey was about to react in a way that would leave America completely speechless, transform his career overnight, and become one of the most powerful moments in the history of live television. The tension in Studio 6B was suffocating. For 3 excruciating seconds, an eternity in television, Steve Harvey stood motionless, his face a battlefield of emotions. The network executives watching the live feed broke into a cold sweat. This was the moment when careers ended, when carefully built empires crumbled in real time. The director's voice crackled through headsets. "Stay with him. Keep camera 3 tight on his face." In the control room, phones were already ringing, network higher-ups demanding to know what was happening on their most profitable daytime show. Then Harvey moved. He took one deliberate step toward the contestant, his microphone gripped so tightly his knuckles whitened. The security team tensed, ready to intervene. The floor. Director frantically waved his arms, signaling to cut to commercial. But Harvey was beyond seeing such signals now. The audience held a collective breath, some covering their mouths in shock, others already recording on their phones, capturing what was surely about to become one of television's most explosive moments. "What did you just say to me?" His voice was dangerously quiet, barely above a whisper, yet somehow it carried through the entire studio. The contestant's smirk faltered, the false confidence evaporating under Harvey's intense gaze. In that moment, the gravity of what they had done began to register on their face. I was just joking around," the contestant stammered, suddenly aware of the catastrophic miscalculation they had made. The audience sat in stunned silence, witnessing the unraveling of carefully maintained television decorum. A woman in the front row audibly gasped. Someone near the back shouted, "Throw them out!" A joke? Harvey's voice rose slightly, a tremor of barely controlled rage rippling through it. "You think that's funny? You think coming on my show and saying that word to my face is a joke?" His hand sliced through the air for emphasis, the gesture sharp and definitive. The control room erupted in chaos. Screens flashed with incoming calls from network executives. "Cut his mic! Go to commercial!" the executive producer shouted, knocking over a coffee in his panic. But the audio engineer, himself frozen in shock, couldn't move fast enough. The stage manager was signaling frantically, drawing a finger across his throat, the universal sign to cut. But Harvey wasn't looking at anything except the person who had just insulted him in front of millions. Harvey's carefully constructed public persona, the one that had made him acceptable to mainstream America, the one that had taken decades to perfect, cracked wide open. The mask fell away completely. 20 years of swallowing casual racism, of smiling through disrespect, of turning the other cheek to maintain his career, all came boiling to the surface. The dam had finally broken. "I have stood here for years." Harvey's voice thundered across the studio, his famous baritone reaching volumes the sound engineers had never had to account for before. The veins in his neck bulged. Spittle flew from his mouth as decades of restrained emotion poured out. I have entertained millions, welcomed everyone with respect, worked twice as hard to get half as far. And you think you can come into my house and disrespect me with that word? The contestant took a step back, visibly intimidated, looking desperately toward the exits. Their planned viral moment was backfiring spectacularly. The audience, initially shocked into silence, began to murmur. A few people started to applaud, tentatively at first, then with growing conviction. An older black woman stood up, raising her fist in solidarity. Do you have any idea what that word means? Harvey continued, his voice trembling with a lifetime of suppressed rage. Each word fell like a hammer blow. Do you know what generations of my family went through? What I've gone through? What I still go through every single day? His voice cracked slightly on the last words, a momentary glimpse of the deep pain beneath the anger. Harvey paced the stage now, the microphone clutched like a weapon. I've smiled when I wanted to scream. I've been polite when I wanted to fight. I've played the game by their rules, my entire career. He jabbed a finger toward the sky, his wedding ring catching the studio lights. I've built this platform brick by brick, show by show, year after year. And you actually thought, you could come here and tear it all down with one word. Your word has no power here. By now, the control room had recovered enough to cut to an emergency commercial break, but it was too late. The damage, or perhaps the miracle, had already happened. Clips were already being recorded on thousands of phones, uploaded to TikTok, Twitter, Instagram. Social media was erupting with hashtags. Bristol Steve snapped, Bristol Harvey unleashed, Stand with Steve. The most authentic moment in daytime television history was spreading like wildfire across the internet. In the frantic commercial break, producers swarmed the stage. Makeup artists hovered uncertainly, wondering if they should try to blot the sweat from Harvey's brow. His personal assistant tried to reach him, but he waved everyone away with a forceful gesture. His chest heaved with emotion, decades of carefully controlled reactions now broken free. His suit jacket was askew, his tie loosened, the polished presenter facade completely dismantled. Mr. Harvey, we need to get you off stage, a producer pleaded, panic evident in her voice. The network is on the line. This is going viral already. We need to issue a statement. I'm not going anywhere, Harvey said, his voice now quiet but firm. He straightened, his shoulders, a determination setting in his features. But sir, the legal department is... I said I'm not going anywhere. His tone left no room for argument. The producer backed away, speaking frantically into her headset. At least let us get the contestant off stage, the floor manager urged. Security has them in the green room. Harvey nodded curtly. Get them out of my sight, but make sure they hear what I have to say next. His longtime director approached cautiously. Steve, I've been with you for 15 years. Whatever you want to do here, I've got your back. But you need to know, this could go either way. The network could stand behind you, or they could fire me. Harvey finished for him. Let them. Some things are more important than contracts. The show's executive producer, a veteran of 30 years in television, pushed through the crowd. We're getting calls from every major news outlet in the country. The clip is everywhere already. The network president is watching the live feed from New York. But Harvey wasn't done. As the floor director desperately signaled that they were about to return from commercial, Harvey made a decision that would alter the course of his career forever. Instead of allowing himself to be ushered off stage, He straightened his tie, took a deep breath, and turned to face the cameras once more. He wiped a bead of sweat from his brow and nodded to the floor director. "Tell them I'm staying. Tell them I've got something to say." The crew looked at each other uncertainly, but the director nodded. "Roll cameras. We're going live in 5, 4, 3. The on-air light blinked red. Millions of viewers who had been frantically texting friends to tune in leaned forward, waiting to see what would happen next. Network lawyers were already calculating the damage control costs. Social media was ablaze with hashtags. Celebrity friends were blowing up Harvey's phone with messages of support or concern. His family watched, from home, hearts in their throats. And Steve Harvey, now standing at the edge of career suicide or his most defining moment, shoulders squared and eyes clear with purpose, opened his mouth to speak again. When the cameras went live again, America held its breath. Steve Harvey stood center stage, tie straightened, but his eyes still blazing with an intensity never before seen on daytime television. The audience, uncertain whether they were witnessing a career implosion or something extraordinary, sat in perfect stillness. "Ladies and gentlemen," Harvey began, his voice remarkably controlled despite the storm within him. "What you just witnessed was something I've spent my entire career trying to avoid. But today, something broke inside me." He paused, looking directly into camera 1, the close-up camera, creating an intimate connection with millions of viewers. "For 30 years, I've played by the rules. I've been the entertainer America wanted me to be. Funny, non-threatening, safe. I've built shows that bring families together. I've tried to be a positive example. But there's a cost to that mask I wear. There's a pain that comes with swallowing your truth day after day." In the control room, fingers hovered over buttons that could cut his feed. Network executives watched in stunned silence from their offices. This raw, unfiltered Steve Harvey was unprecedented and unpredictable. That word that was used against me today, it's not just a word. It represents centuries of degradation, of dehumanization. It represents every time my father was called boy despite being a grown man. It represents every door that was closed in my face before I became Steve Harvey. His voice grew stronger with each word, his trademark cadence taking on a powerful, almost sermonic quality. The audience began to respond with murmurs of agreement, a few "tell it" exclamations punctuating his pauses. "I've spent my life making sure you're comfortable with me in your living rooms, making sure I never reminded you too much of the struggles people who look like me face every day. But today, I can't do that anymore." Harvey moved away from his mark, ignoring the floor director's frantic gestures. He walked to the edge of the stage, addressing the studio audience directly. "My grandparents couldn't vote. My parents couldn't drink from certain water fountains. I grew up being told there were places I couldn't go, things I couldn't do, dreams I shouldn't have. And still, I believed in America's promise. I still do." A woman in the front row wiped tears from her eyes. Several audience members had risen to their feet. But belief requires truth. And the truth is, we're not there yet. We're not in a post-racial society. That word that was hurled at me today, it's still being used against children on playgrounds, against employees in workplaces, against families just trying to live their lives. Harvey's voice caught for a moment, a rare display of vulnerability. The studio was completely silent. "I've built my career making you laugh. Today, I'm asking you to think, to feel, to understand that when you stay silent in the face of hatred, you become part of the problem." The production team, initially panicked, had now backed off completely. The director had made the decision to let Harvey speak, consequences be damned. History was unfolding on their stage. To the person who thought it was acceptable to use that slur against me today, I'm not going to give you what you wanted. You wanted me to lose control, to become the angry black man that fits your narrative. Instead, I'm going to use this moment to speak my truth, to stand in my dignity. Harvey took a deep breath, his next words measured and clear. From this moment forward, I'm done pretending. I'm done making others comfortable at the expense of my own humanity. I'm still Steve Harvey. I'll still bring you entertainment and joy, but I will also bring you honesty. And if that costs me, this show, endorsements, fans, then that's the price of my self-respect. The audience was now on their feet, applause building like a wave. Social media was exploding, with clips of Harvey's speech being shared millions of times. Celebrity friends were posting messages of support. The real Steve Harvey was trending nationwide. And then Harvey did something that stunned everyone. He looked directly into the camera, smiled that familiar Steve Harvey smile, and said, "Now let's get back to our regularly scheduled program. We've still got a game to play." What happened next would change television forever. As the commercial break ended and the game resumed, something extraordinary happened. The energy in the studio had completely transformed. The audience wasn't just applauding politely. They were energized, emotionally invested in a way that transcended typical game show enthusiasm. Harvey's authenticity had created a connection so powerful that it seemed to electrify everyone present. The air itself felt different, charged with possibility and meaning. The next contestant came on stage, visibly nervous, but also oddly hopeful, as if they could sense that they were part of something larger than a game show. Harvey greeted them with genuine warmth, but there was a difference now. His interactions carried a newfound depth that hadn't existed minutes before. When he joked, it felt real, grounded in actual human connection rather than the perfectly timed comedic beats of a seasoned entertainer. When he listened to contestants' stories about their families, their dreams, their struggles, his attention was undivided and sincere. The mask had been removed, and what remained was infinitely more compelling than the carefully constructed persona that had existed just moments before. People watching at home felt it too. Text messages flooded into local news stations. Social media exploded with people describing the exact moment they felt something shift. Parents told their children that they had just witnessed something important. Teachers paused their lessons to discuss what they had seen. The conversation transcended the confines of the studio. Behind the scenes, chaos erupted in a way that only television's highest echelons could experience. Network executives scrambled to manage what they initially thought would be a catastrophic crisis. Conference calls were hastily arranged. Legal teams were mobilized. PR departments prepared damage control statements. The network's stock price was monitored minute by minute, executives watching to see if the crisis would tank their market value. But within the first hour of the speech going viral, something entirely unexpected occurred. Instead of the predicted condemnation from conservative media outlets and corporate sponsors distancing themselves, the response was overwhelmingly positive across the entire spectrum. Stand with Steve exploded across social media, accumulating millions of posts within hours. The hashtag trended not just nationally, but globally. Corporate sponsors, rather than quietly withdrawing their support, issued carefully crafted statements of backing. Major brands that had associations with Harvey doubled down on their partnerships. Messages of support poured in from viewers across every demographic. From celebrities with massive platforms, from everyday people who had been moved by Harvey's raw honesty in a way they hadn't expected. The network's legal team, fully prepared for lawsuits and cease and desist orders from the contestant's family, received nothing of the sort. In fact, the contestant had essentially vanished from public view. Their social media accounts were deleted or made private. Their Twitter history was scrubbed. They had gambled on creating a viral moment of infamy, counting on the shock value and the attention, and instead became a pariah, rejected not only by mainstream society, but even by fringe communities that might have initially sympathized with their provocative behavior. Harvey's longtime agent called within the hour, her voice carrying an unusual combination of excitement and uncertainty. "The network president wants to speak with you immediately," she said, her tone suggesting she wasn't entirely sure what to expect. "He's calling an emergency meeting. I don't know if this is good or bad, Steve. Be prepared for anything." Harvey's heart sank as he listened. This was it. The moment he had feared since the words left his mouth on live television. Termination, probably coupled with extensive non-disclosure agreements that would silence him forever, preventing him from ever discussing what had happened or why. His career, the one he had meticulously built over 3 decades, was about to come crashing down. But when he entered the network's executive conference room via video call, the network president's office was in New York, while Harvey was still in Los Angeles at the studio, something completely different happened. The atmosphere was nothing like what he had anticipated. The network president, a man named David Chen, whom Harvey had worked with for 15 years, looked directly at him with tears streaming down his cheeks. He wasn't angry. He wasn't cold. He appeared genuinely moved. "Steve, I've been in this business for 40 years, the president said, his voice slightly shaky. "I've produced shows, managed networks, navigated crises, and I've never seen anything like what just happened. Do you understand what you did out there?" Harvey steeled himself, expecting criticism. "I lost control," Harvey said quietly, his shoulders sagging slightly. "I broke protocol. I violated every rule in the playbook. I understand if the network needs to distance itself." "No," Chen interrupted forcefully, leaning forward. "You didn't lose control. You told the truth, the actual, unvarnished, deeply human truth. And America is watching. We're getting calls from every major platform, Netflix, Amazon, Apple Plus, everyone. They all want to talk about deals with you. Our affiliate stations are reporting that they've never seen engagement numbers like this. CNN wants you for an exclusive interview. The Today Show wants you for a full-hour segment. And our ratings, Steve, our ratings just went through the roof. You didn't crash the show, you transcended it. You elevated it into something culturally significant." Harvey sat back in his chair, stunned into silence. His mind struggled to process what he was hearing. "There's more," Chen continued, his excitement building. "We've already had 3 board meetings in the past hour. We want to create something new. A platform where you can speak freely, where you can combine entertainment with the kind of honesty you just displayed. We're talking bigger than the game show. We're talking about shaping cultural conversation. We're talking about legacy." Over the next 72 hours, Harvey's life shifted, fundamentally on its axis. The moment that should have ended his career became the catalyst for an unprecedented reinvention. Major news outlets competed fiercely for exclusive interviews. Civil rights organizations, universities, and cultural institutions invited him to speak. Young people on social media, particularly Gen Z, shared videos explaining how his speech had profoundly resonated with their own experiences of navigating identity, belonging, and dignity in contemporary America. But Harvey, surprisingly, didn't immediately accept every opportunity that came flooding in. Instead, he did something that caught everyone off guard. He met with the network executives and pushed back against their initial plans. "I don't want this to become about me as some kind of hero or martyr," he told executives during a late-night call, his voice firm and measured. "I don't want to transform into a symbol of racial activism just because I finally said what I should have said years ago. That would be opportunistic. That would be turning this moment of genuine emotion into a brand. I want this to be about creating real, substantive change." Together with Chen and the network's creative team, they developed a comprehensive proposal. Harvey would continue hosting his game show, the financial engine that powered everything else. But the network would simultaneously invest in creating an entirely new primetime platform, where he could engage in substantive conversations about race, identity, American history, and culture. Not a conventional talk show in the traditional sense, but something more intimate, more vulnerable, and more intellectually rigorous. Conversations that actually mattered, that pushed beyond surface-level platitudes. The proposal was detailed and ambitious. It included commitments to bring diverse voices and perspectives. It outlined a commitment to follow-up conversations and actual social initiatives that would extend beyond television. It proposed partnerships with educational institutions and civil rights organizations. The network would essentially be making Harvey the centerpiece of a larger cultural moment. The proposal went to the corporate board for approval. It required significant investment, considerable time commitment from Harvey, and substantial risk for the network. Shareholders might object. Advertisers might balk at the controversial nature of some conversations. There were countless ways it could go wrong. But the board, seeing the unprecedented public response, the genuine cultural resonance, and the potential for both meaningful impact and significant rating success, approved it unanimously. The vote took less than 30 minutes, almost unheard of for corporate America. Harvey's extended family watched it all unfold with a complex mixture of pride and genuine concern. His ex-wives, with whom he had maintained cordial and respectful relationships over the years, called to express their support and pride in his courage. His adult children texted him videos of their friends and colleagues sharing his speech, discussing its impact. His mother, now in her mid-80s and living in Ohio, called him with such emotion that he could barely understand her words through her tears. "Baby, I'm so proud of you," she said, her voice trembling. "So incredibly proud." "But are you absolutely sure about this? You've worked so hard for what you have. Are you ready to risk it all?" "Mom," Harvey replied, his own voice thick with emotion and sincerity. "I've spent my whole life working for this moment, not for the money or the fame, but to be able to do something that genuinely matters, something that changes the conversation. Today I finally got the chance to do that. How could I possibly walk away from it?" The industry watched and waited with bated breath. Would Harvey follow through on these ambitious plans? Would this moment of authenticity inevitably fade into just another manufactured celebrity narrative, another hollow attempt at relevance? Or had something genuinely shifted in Harvey's consciousness and in the cultural consciousness at large? Within 2 weeks, Harvey announced his new project to the world via a press conference that drew media from around the globe. International news organizations sent representatives because they recognized the significance of what was happening. Standing at a simple podium, composed yet visibly moved, he outlined his vision for a show called Real Conversations, a platform dedicated to exploring the honest struggles, triumphs, perspectives, and experiences of Americans from all backgrounds. With Harvey as both host and genuine participant in the dialogue, he promised that the show would be uncomfortable at times, that it would challenge viewers, and that it would never shy away from difficult truths. "This isn't about me," he said at the press conference, his voice carrying the weight of conviction. "This is about creating deliberate, intentional space for the conversations America desperately needs to have. The ones we've been avoiding for decades. The ones that make us deeply uncomfortable, but ultimately bring us closer together. The ones that remind us of our shared humanity." The announcement generated immediate discussion and debate across media platforms. Critics questioned whether Harvey was the right person to lead such substantive conversations, pointing to his entertainment background and questioning his credentials. Some praised his courage and vision. Others remained deeply skeptical that real change would come from a network initiative that might ultimately prioritize ratings over substance. But what nobody could deny was that something authentic and significant had shifted. The ratings for Harvey's game show remained strong, consistent with historical trends. But they weren't what people were talking about anymore. People were talking about Steve Harvey, the person. Flawed, honest, willing to risk his entire empire for something that mattered more than career security or financial gain. And then, just when the story seemed to be reaching its natural conclusion, something happened that nobody, not the network, not Harvey himself, not even the most seasoned media analysts, saw coming. 3 weeks into production of Real Conversations, Harvey sat in his dressing room reviewing notes for the show's pilot episode. The guest was a prominent civil rights historian, and the conversation was meant to be substantive and challenging. But Harvey's phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. His security team had already flagged it as coming through a private channel, which meant it had bypassed normal screening. The message read, "Mr. Harvey, I need to speak with you about something that happened on set the day of your outburst. It's important. It's about the contestant." Harvey's stomach tightened. He showed the message to his security chief, Marcus, a former Secret Service agent who had been protecting Harvey for the past 5 years. "Could be a threat," Marcus said, studying the number. "Could be someone trying to manipulate you. We should flag it." But something in Harvey's gut told him this was different. "Trace it," he said. "Find out who this person is." Within 2 hours, Marcus returned with information. The sender was a production assistant named Jennifer Walsh, someone who had been working on the show for 3 years, but whom Harvey had barely interacted with. According to her background check, she had no criminal history, no social media presence, and no obvious reason to contact him. But there was something else. She had requested a transfer to a different department the day after the incident with the contestant. Harvey made a decision that surprised his security team. Set up a meeting, neutral location, but make it happen today. That afternoon, in a private room at a coffee shop in Studio City, Harvey met with Jennifer Walsh for the first time. She was in her early 30s, nervous, her hands trembling as she sat across from him. "Thank you for meeting with me," she began, her voice barely above a whisper. "I know this is unusual. I couldn't stay quiet anymore." "About what?" Harvey asked gently. Jennifer took a deep breath. "The contestant, the one who said the slur. I need to tell you what really happened, what actually led to that moment." Harvey leaned forward, intrigued and cautious. "The contestant didn't just randomly decide to say that word," Jennifer explained, pulling out her phone. She showed Harvey a series of text messages and emails. They were set up, paid to do it. There's a media company, a relatively unknown one, that specializes in creating viral moments. They approached this contestant weeks ago with an offer. $50,000 to provoke you on live television in a specific way designed to make you lose control. Harvey's blood ran cold. Who hired them? That's where it gets complicated, Jennifer said. The contestant doesn't actually know. They were paid through cryptocurrency and intermediaries. But I did some digging. I have friends in production at other networks. And I found evidence that suggests the media company was funded by someone with a specific agenda. Which is? Jennifer hesitated, clearly wrestling with whether to continue. To discredit you. To create a moment where you would appear to be exactly what certain narratives claim you are. An angry black man, unstable, dangerous. The plan was for the clip to go viral, but in a negative way. They wanted it to destroy you. Harvey sat back, processing this information. His initial instinct was to dismiss it as conspiracy thinking, but the evidence Jennifer was presenting seemed credible. "Why are you telling me this?" he asked. "Because it didn't work the way they planned," Jennifer said, tears forming in her eyes. "Because what you did, what you actually did, was so much more powerful than what they tried to orchestrate. You took their trap and you transformed it into something real, something beautiful. And I couldn't be part of a system that would try to destroy that." Over the next week, Harvey hired independent investigators to verify Jennifer's claims. What they uncovered was shocking. There was indeed a coordinated effort to discredit him, funded by a coalition of interests that ranged from competitors in the entertainment industry to political operatives who saw Harvey's growing cultural influence as a threat. But here's where the story took an unexpected turn. Rather than keeping this information private or using it for revenge, Harvey made a decision that would define this entire moment. He decided to expose it publicly, on Real Conversations. His team urged him to handle it quietly, through legal channels. The network executives begged him to reconsider. This could turn into a massive conspiracy narrative, they warned. It could undermine your credibility. But Harvey had tasted authenticity now, and he couldn't go back to playing it safe. The pilot episode of Real Conversations was scheduled to air on a Thursday night. The network had spent millions promoting it. Celebrities had been lined up to appear. But Harvey made a unilateral decision to scrap all of that and instead use the premiere to tell this story, the real story of what had happened. The episode opened with Harvey sitting alone on a simple set. No audience, no pretense. Just him and the camera. "Welcome to Real Conversations," he began. "I want to start this show not with the conversation I planned, but with a conversation about truth, manipulation, and what it means to stand in your integrity when the world is actively working against you." For the next hour, he laid out everything. The coordinated effort to destroy him. The contestants who had been paid. The media companies and operatives behind it. He showed documents, emails, cryptocurrency transaction records. He introduced Jennifer Walsh and let her tell her story directly to the camera. And then he did something extraordinary. He interviewed the media executive who had orchestrated the plot. Via video call, they had agreed to participate, and asked him directly why he had done it. "You're a threat," the executive said, surprisingly candid. "You were becoming too influential. You were stepping outside your lane. You were supposed to be entertainment, not a voice for social change. The system works better when people like you stay in their designated roles." Harvey didn't argue. He didn't get angry. He simply asked follow-up questions, getting the executive to articulate the entire worldview that had motivated the attack. The episode aired on Thursday night to record-breaking viewership. Within hours, it had generated more conversation than any television moment in recent memory. The media companies involved faced immediate backlash. Sponsors withdrew. Journalists began investigating the broader networks of manipulation that had been exposed. But more importantly, something shifted in the cultural consciousness. Harvey had taken an attempt to destroy him and transformed it into a teaching moment about how power, media, and manipulation intersect in America. He had demonstrated that authenticity, vulnerability, and truth-telling could be more powerful than any carefully orchestrated attack. In the days following the episode, Harvey received messages from educators wanting to use the episode in their classrooms. Civil rights organizations wanted to partner with him on media literacy initiatives. Young people flooded social media with testimonies about how watching him navigate this situation with integrity had changed their perspective on what leadership could look like. But the most profound moment came when the contestant, the one who had been paid to provoke him, reached out. Through intermediaries, they requested a meeting with Harvey. When they sat down together, the contestant broke down in tears. "I didn't know," they said repeatedly. "I didn't understand what I was part of. I just saw the money and the opportunity for attention. I didn't realize I was being used as a weapon." Harvey listened without judgment. And then he did something that shocked everyone. He offered to help them rebuild their reputation, not to erase what had happened, but to help them understand it, learn from it, and move forward with integrity. "We're all complicit in systems we don't fully understand," Harvey told them. "The question is what we do once we become aware. Do we hide? Do we make excuses? Or do we own it and grow from it?" The contestant eventually became a voice for media literacy, traveling to schools and speaking about how they had been manipulated and what they had learned from the experience. And Harvey's show, Real Conversations, became something unprecedented in American television. A space where difficult truths were told, where systems of power were examined, where ordinary people and extraordinary figures came together to have conversations that actually mattered. But even as everything seemed to be coming together in an almost perfect narrative arc, Harvey knew that the real work was just beginning. The conversation he had started was bigger than one show, bigger than one moment. 6 months after the premiere of Real Conversations, Steve Harvey stood backstage at a massive auditorium in Atlanta, preparing to address a gathering of over 5,000 educators, activists, and community leaders. The show had become a cultural phenomenon, spawning a movement that extended far beyond television screens. The ripple effects had been extraordinary and multifaceted. Universities had begun offering courses analyzing episodes of Real Conversations as case studies in media literacy and social dialogue. High schools were using clips in civics classes to spark conversations about race, identity, and American history. Book clubs across the country were reading the transcripts and discussing the deeper implications of the conversations Harvey had facilitated. But what Harvey cared about most wasn't the ratings or the accolades. It was the actual change happening on the ground. Real Conversations had launched a fellowship program that trained young journalists, activists, and community organizers in the art of authentic dialogue. The program had already selected its first cohort of 50 participants from underrepresented backgrounds. They would spend a year working with Harvey's team, learning how to facilitate difficult conversations in their own communities. Harvey's production company had also begun funding independent documentaries exploring systemic inequality in education, criminal justice, and healthcare. These weren't sanitized network productions. They were raw, honest, sometimes uncomfortable examinations of how America's systems actually functioned for different populations. As he waited in the wings, Harvey reflected on how far he had come from that moment 3 months ago when he had nearly lost everything. or so he thought. Instead, he had found something far more valuable, purpose that transcended ego. His phone buzzed. A text from his mother. Watching the live stream from home. "I'm so proud, baby. Your father would be too." His father had passed away 15 years earlier, a man who had struggled with his own dignity in a system designed to diminish him. Harvey had spent years trying to honor his memory through success and achievement. But this felt like a deeper kind of honoring. The stage manager gave him the signal. Harvey took a deep breath and walked out to thunderous applause. "Good evening," he began, his voice carrying the weight of everything he had learned over the past months. "I want to start by acknowledging something that still amazes me. 6 months ago, I was living a successful life by conventional standards. I had money, fame, influence. But I was also living a lie, a carefully constructed version of myself designed to make other people comfortable." He paused, looking out at the sea of faces. People of all races, ages, and backgrounds united by a commitment to change. That moment on live television, when I finally stopped performing and started being real, it changed everything. Not because it made me famous or because it generated ratings. It changed everything because it showed me what was possible when we stop hiding and start being honest. Over the next hour, Harvey outlined an ambitious vision for what real conversations would become. The show was expanding to include community-based episodes, where Harvey and his team would travel to different cities and facilitate conversations with ordinary people about their lives and experiences. They were launching a digital platform where anyone could submit conversations they were having, creating a crowdsourced archive of authentic American dialogue. But perhaps most importantly, they were launching the Real Change Initiative, a comprehensive program that would take the conversations happening on television and transform them into concrete policy recommendations and community action plans. "Conversation without action is just entertainment," Harvey said bluntly. "And I'm done being just an entertainer. We're going to take what we learn in these conversations and work with policymakers, community organizations, and grassroots movements to actually change the systems we're discussing." The audience responded with sustained applause. But Harvey held up his hand for silence. "I need to be honest about something else," he continued. "I'm terrified. I'm terrified that this will fail. I'm terrified that I'll become another celebrity who talks about change but doesn't actually deliver it. I'm terrified that I'll compromise, that I'll get tired, that I'll eventually retreat back into safety." His vulnerability was disarming. Major networks rarely broadcast their own insecurity. "But I'm more terrified of what happens if I don't try, if I go back to being safe, if I retreat into the comfortable lie I was living before. Because now I know what the truth feels like. And I can't unknow that." In the months following this speech, real conversations continued to evolve. The show brought on new voices, people Harvey had never worked with before. A former KKK member who had left the organization and was working on racial reconciliation. A young trans activist fighting for health care access. A police officer and a criminal justice reformer sitting down to actually listen to each other's perspectives. Some episodes were criticized. Some sponsors withdrew. Some viewers felt the show had become too political, too activist-oriented. Harvey lost some of his traditional audience, but he gained something else: credibility with audiences who had previously dismissed him as a sellout or an Uncle Tom figure in entertainment. More importantly, he gained respect from people actually working for change. The Real Change Initiative partnered with major civil rights organizations to develop specific policy proposals. They worked with education experts to create curriculum standards for media literacy in schools. They collaborated with criminal justice reform advocates to propose changes to sentencing guidelines. Not all of these initiatives succeeded. Some faced political opposition. Some ran into bureaucratic obstacles. But the effort itself, the demonstrated commitment to turning conversation into action, changed the perception of what a celebrity could do with their platform. A year after the original incident, Harvey sat down for an interview with a major national magazine. The interviewer asked him the question everyone wanted answered. Was it all worth it? That's the wrong question, Harvey replied thoughtfully. It's not about whether one moment of honesty was worth the risk. It's about whether living authentically for the rest of your life is worth the risk. And the answer to that is yes. Always yes. He paused, then added, "But I want to be clear about something. I'm not special. I'm not a hero. I'm just a guy who got tired of lying and decided to tell the truth. What makes this moment significant is not me. It's what it revealed about America's hunger for authenticity. People are desperate for real conversation. They're starving for it." Harvey's impact extended into unexpected places. Young people began using real conversations clips in their own social media content, creating memes and discussion threads that spread the ideas even further. Teachers reported that students were more engaged in discussions about difficult topics. Families told stories of using episodes as a springboard for conversations they had been avoiding for years. But perhaps the most powerful indicator of change came from an unexpected source. The contestant, the one who had been paid to provoke Harvey, had become an advocate for media literacy and manipulation awareness. They had written a memoir titled "Manufactured Outrage: How I Became a Weapon and What I Learned," that became a bestseller. Proceeds from the book went to organizations fighting media manipulation and promoting authentic dialogue. The two had become unlikely allies, their story serving as a powerful example of redemption and growth. As Harvey reflected on everything that had happened, he realized something profound. The moment he had lost it on live television wasn't actually about losing control. It was about finally gaining control. Control over his own narrative, his own truth, his own life. He had spent 30 years performing a version of himself designed to be palatable, non-threatening, safe. That version had been successful by conventional metrics, but it had also been exhausting. Living a lie, no matter how comfortable that lie was, came at a cost. Now, living in truth, messy, complicated, sometimes uncomfortable truth, felt like freedom. On a quiet Tuesday evening, Harvey sat in his home office, reviewing footage from the latest Real Conversations episode. The guest had been a woman who had been incarcerated for 20 years and recently released. Her story was raw and powerful and heartbreaking and ultimately hopeful. As Harvey watched, he thought about his father, about his mother, about everyone in his family who had struggled against systems designed to diminish them. He thought about all the years he had tried to transcend his identity rather than embrace it. And he smiled. Because now he understood. The moment he had lost it wasn't the end of anything. It was the beginning of everything. Real Conversations had expanded to include international episodes. Harvey had traveled to South Africa, Brazil, and India, facilitating conversations about race, identity, and systemic inequality in different cultural contexts. The show had won multiple Emmy awards. But more importantly, it had generated measurable social impact. Policy changes in several states, new educational initiatives, and a demonstrated shift in how Americans engaged with conversations about difficult topics. Harvey had also stepped back from his game show hosting duties, delegating those responsibilities to a rotating group of younger hosts he was mentoring. He had discovered that his real gift wasn't entertainment. It was connection. It was the ability to create space where people felt safe enough to be honest. His personal life had also transformed. He had remarried, not for the first time, but this time to someone who understood and supported his new mission. They had created a foundation dedicated to supporting organizations working on racial justice and media literacy. But perhaps most significantly, Harvey had become a different kind of public figure. Not a celebrity performing for approval, but a human being doing work that mattered. He was more respected and more criticized than ever before. Some people thought he had gone too far. Others thought he hadn't gone far enough. And Harvey had learned to be okay with that. Because the middle ground, the place where everyone liked you, was where nothing real could happen. On the anniversary of the original incident, Harvey was invited to speak at a major university. As he stood in front of hundreds of students, he shared the full story. Not the sanitized version that had made it into documentaries, but the complete, complicated, messy truth. That moment, he told them, wasn't about me losing control. It was about me finally choosing myself over the version of myself I thought everyone wanted. And that choice changed everything. He looked out at the young faces in the auditorium. You're all going to face moments where you have to choose between the comfortable lie and the difficult truth. I'm here to tell you, choose the truth. Always choose the truth. Because a life lived in service of other people's comfort is not actually a life. It's a performance. And performances, no matter how successful, eventually feel like a prison. The students gave him a standing ovation. But Harvey knew that the real test would come later. When they faced their own moments of choice, their own opportunities to be brave or to retreat into safety. That was the real conversation. That was the work that mattered. And Steve Harvey, no longer the perfectly coiffed entertainer, but instead a man genuinely committed to truth-telling and authentic connection, was ready to keep facilitating it for as long as he lived. Because now he understood what he had been missing all those years. The simple, profound power of being real.